Hey there, YouTubers. Got the Asus Z390p motherboard out. Just got this. There's the exact title. So we're going to put a i5-9600k in it, and some RAM, and this Cooler Master Hyper 212 LED, I believe, is the CPU cooler I've got. And we'll probably stick a M.2 in here as well, but this will just be a physical install. I'm not going to go through and do any testing or any of that stuff. Later on I will do a BIOS update video, probably some other videos. You'll see this one featured in a few gaming videos over the next year or two. So let's get into it. Alright, first thing we got to do is open this up. And there is our socket, our 1151. Now I'm coming over here, opening up my plastic container. Now I have used this CPU quite a few times. You can tell it's a little grungy on the outsides. So this only goes in one way, and it's kind of hard to see, but you want to be able to read the what the text says. And it's pretty much certain things in your socket you want to look for. You can just barely see it, but there is a notch cut out of this. You see that at the very top left? That corresponds with, I'm going to point at it with the tip right in there, okay? And there's one on this side as well. So if you have an ATX motherboard, pretty much always going to be, or it's always going to be oriented this way, right? So I can drop that in. We want to make sure that we line that up good. We don't want to have to move it around after the fact. And just so you guys can see that, it is in there. Now, other things you can look for. CPU itself has a triangle on it, okay? Sometimes they do a good job on the motherboard of noting where that goes. Other times it is on the plastic cover. Now if you don't have the plastic cover on, then you will have some difficulty as far as that aspect goes. But all kinds of different ways that Intel helps you with orienting this. Alright, so now we want to drop this down, and we're going to pull this lever back. We want it to go under the post here, which it is, and then now once it's there we can do this, and boom, that drops off. Okay, it's very important that you do that correctly, because if you don't, you could damage your CPU. Alright, so it's in there. Now a lot of things we could do here. Let's go ahead and get our CPU cooler ready to go. So first thing I need is some thermal paste. In this case, though this is not a Noctua cooler, we're going to use the Noctua CPU paste. So depending on what CPU cooler you use, you may put the paste on now, or you may want to put your mounting bracket on. In this case, we'll go ahead and put the mounting bracket on, and then we'll get back to that thermal paste. So we went ahead and put the mounting bracket in from the other side, and you can see the 4 posts are sticking through. And that's what you want to see, those lined up. Now we've got these hexagonal, I guess we can call them standoffs. They've included a tool in here to tighten these down. So we're going to start off by finger tightening them. You want to be careful that you don't damage these, as you only get 4. And to be honest with you, Cooler Master kind of sucks about getting replacement parts. But so hopefully don't lose them. And they're not really good about telling you what the parts are. I don't believe it's an American company. Every time I've contacted them, I feel like I'm talking to somebody that does not understand English. So what I'm going to do is use this and tighten it down. I can't do it one-handed, so we're going to pause the video while I go around and do that. Alright, so just so you can see, I have a number 1 Phillips, and you can probably get away with a number 2. Tightening this down, basically, using 2 hands. You want to secure the motherboard. I went around and did all 4 of these. Normally, I would use a nice camera stand. I'd have this in 4K, all kinds of other stuff, but currently in Africa, we're limited in the resources we have, unfortunately. So, alright, now we're ready for thermal paste, folks. So once you unscrew the cap, or if you are using, trying to think of what came with this, it may have included this, something like this, where you've got to cut it. Now, Noctua usually says for this style of CPU that you need a 4mm diameter circle. They don't tell you how high to go. This is something where you could, test it out on a piece of paper, draw 4mm, just to get an idea how much. I, pretty much go with about eyeballing it, what looks to be about the, oops, of course I screwed it up on video. So you don't want to put too much down, and you don't want to not put enough down. So this is kind of an important thing. And we've got our thermal paste on there. So now what we're going to do is take our CPU cooler, and we want to make sure we orient this the right way, right? So you don't want to put it on this way if you want the fans to blow out of the case. So here's the back. This is basically where the back of the case is. These are your where your I/O shield's going to go, and so you want this facing this way. Now you also have to make sure that the CPU cooler is in itself somewhat symmetrical. In this case, it looks like it doesn't matter which side I'm going to attach the fan, so we will go ahead and put it in this orientation. And you want to line these guys up, which, once again, difficult to do holding a camera, but we've done this enough that hopefully you guys saw that in the video. Okay, so there we are. We're lined up. Now I'm going to take my same number 1 and start tightening this down. Now I'm not going to tighten it all the way down. I'm going to work my way from here to the other side. If we can see this. I don't know if we can see it. And then we'll go do these guys. So the hope is that we're getting a few threads in on each side before I start cranking it down. Nothing worse than working with one of these where you have cranked down 3 sides and one of them is not cranked down at all. Sometimes you have to loosen them. And from here, folks, I'm going to pause this while I tighten these down good. All right, so these are all tightened down. Then we got our Cooler Master fan. So the important thing about this is knowing which side of this is which, and if you're going to add an additional one, knowing how to orient this. So we only got the one fan, and this is set up so this is intake side, and this is the exhaust. And since you want your fan to be basically taking in cold air from, if this was inside the case, you'd have hopefully openings in the front. It would suck in cool air through the fan, across the heat sinks, and out the back. And usually it'll have a fan in this area. Of course, when this is in the case, you would see that better. But we're going to stop, pretty close to where we are here in a moment, and that will end the video. But to continue on, I've got to basically, before I put this on, so we know we're going to have it on this side. We have our power cable here basically that we want to make sure it's oriented in the right direction and on the right side. You don't want this, all the way over here. We want it basically to drop off over here. So when I put this on, it's basically going to snap in, and then we will force it over onto the other side. And when you get that snapped in there, it's going to look like that. Okay. Now, our cable, power this up. See how many pins we have there? It's 4. Down here are 2 places for CPU coolers if you had dual fans. In this case, we're going to grab this top one, and this can go in only one way, okay? So make sure that you have it lined up right, and boom, it's in. Okay? Alright, so I rotated it 90 degrees. We're going to go ahead and put some RAM in here. Now, important thing with RAM, folks, is that you may, want to pick 36 megahertz RAM, like this is 3200. If you don't check the manufacturer's website, you may not get the exact speed that they state, right? So these have like a base speed. It may be most likely this is like 2133, 2133 megahertz, and the overclock speed is basically 3600. Now, potentially this will run hotter than that, maybe 3700, maybe 38, who knows, until we find out. But what you'll do is you go to the manufacturer's website, and there's a place in there under support called Memory QVL. That'll show you the compatible memory. You will look for the actual RAM that you're going to use. That's the smart way to do this, okay? Now, I am just going to put this in there and see how it goes. After the fact, I'll let you know if it was compatible. I have a bunch of RAM here, so we we can try several different ones. Alright, so I'm putting the RAM in. Depending on what kind of motherboard you have, you may these tabs on the sides, you may have 2 of them versus 1. In this case, we've only got 1. And this can only go in one way, folks, because the bottoms, and I'll show you in a second, one side is longer than the other. So surprisingly, I'm having a lot more difficulty than I should with one hand. Alright, so once you get there, you're going to give this a nice push down, and boom. So it looks like it's in there, folks. So we'll do the second one. Now you'll see, basically, this could almost kind of tell you with some of these. You've got the text on one side, not the other, so which kind of tells you it's going to face this way, right? But what you really want to look for is the connectors at the bottom. You see the left side and then the right side are 2 different links. There's that separator in the middle, and that's basically what you want to look for on the motherboard, because the left one is shorter than the right, which means it has to be oriented this way. And usually it's a lot easier to get these in, but in this case, not so easy. Probably one hand. One hand has a lot to do with it. Okay, so you kind of want to hear those double clicks. It's in there. Now, what's next, folks? So usually at this point, I will hook up a power supply, since I do a lot of testing, I'll usually hook up this device, which is basically the power button, right? So you don't need a case. You probably will install this in a case, and we're going to stop short of doing that aspect. But I would check to make sure I can boot to BIOS, and then once I get that, I would then probably put a drive in, okay? And most of my drives already have operating system on them, so you guys won't benefit from that aspect. But one thing, if you do buy this motherboard, you need to find in your box, your motherboard box, is the little standoff here and the M.2 screw. So we're going to go ahead and install one right here, and I'll probably go ahead and do the second one since I'll have the bag open. Alright, so we'll show you one, and then I'll spare you from me doing the second one. So depending on what size your M.2 is, you will want to line this up. This should be 2280 at the very end, And I'm basically going to just screw this in. Hopefully. And this is basically what your M.2, the end of it's going to sit on. And so I've screwed that in. Now let me grab a actual NVMe M.2. This guy's a Samsung. And I'm going to come in at an angle, like so. And boom. So it's not squared up. Now it is squared up. You see how that's sitting? Once I grab my M.2, I'll put it on best to have it on a magnetic screwdriver, and then I'll screw it in there. So I'm going to show you what it looks like after the fact, because I can't do it with the holding the cell phone. Alright, so a little blurry, it looks like. So I've got it in, I've got everything lined up. Now I'm just going to fasten this down. And voila. So it's ready to go, folks, from that aspect. So, you know, for the most part, you guys would stop at this point and put this in your computer. Maybe you wouldn't put the NVMe yet. And it all depends on whether you have an operating system installed or not. I would, you know, for most of you, I would stop at this point before I put that in. And depending on what kind of CPU you have, you may also need a graphics card to get this to boot up in the future. But so to wrap this up, I'm going to go ahead and put in my little power button. And I need to go over here, and I know that it's the second row up here and the second set of pins. So now I have a way to power this up once I connect a power supply. And we're going to do that next. Alright, so since we have the i5-9600k in here, we don't need a graphics card to boot this up. Like I said, most of you guys can stop at this point in the video, unless you're wanting to know what you would do in a case. So got this power supply back here. I do have it completely unplugged from the wall. And so what we're looking for here are our CPU connectors. Now these are basically 2x4s, and they're going to fit in here, and they only fit in one way. Alright, and what you're looking for is that little gizmo that's sticking off of there that's going to click down, and boom, it's in there. You can barely hear the click, but it did click. And I'm using a, I think it's an EVGA 500 watt power supply. Alright, now next thing you're looking for is your 24 pin ATX power connector, and that also can go on here only one way, and we will put that in there. Alright, so it's good to go. Now from this point you would actually connect a keyboard, mouse, all that stuff, alright? And maybe even your HDMI connector, or I think this has DisplayPort, so one of those two to get a video connector. So we can see now we actually have power to the motherboard, and this thing's ready to go. Alright, so I have HDMI here, and I have USB for the keyboard and the mouse, and we're going to fire this up now. So just so you all can see it, make sure I get the button in there. You can see the fan. The fan is about to start spinning, and voila, so it's on. And that's going to do it for this video, folks. Thanks for checking it out. Please like, please subscribe. Thank you.